A former PlayStation executive just said something wild, that Xbox Game Pass is, quote, dangerous and could ruin the entire gaming industry. I've seen all the covers. This has been a hot topic over on social media. I've seen a lot of analysis on it, but here's what I've not seen anyone say. I don't think his point is about protecting the industry. I don't think him saying that is about his desire to protect the industry. I think it's about protecting an outdated business model that's finally being disrupted. In this video, I'm gonna break down why Xbox Game Pass is terrifying to the old guard, why this executive is dead wrong, and what this means for the future of how you play games. If you care about Xbox, if you care about Game Pass, if you care about gaming and where it's heading, you're going to want to stay tuned. We're going to go over it all. Let's jump right into it right off the bat here. This is a tweet from VGT Gaming News, and they cover, for the most part, all of his quotes. The entire article is a pretty long one over at gamesindustry.biz, and I don't want to go over it in detail because it comes from a very specific worldview that I just disagree with, and I think that their analysis is wrong on many, many fronts. But I wanted to focus on what Shawn Layden says here specifically, especially when he says, that it's dangerous. That's mind-boggling to me. Ultimately, what I think is happening here is this is the old guard in gaming trying to gatekeep the future of gaming, if that makes sense. Here's what he said. First, he says that subscription games are going to create that developers under a subscription gaming model are going to be wage slaves. I just disagree with the term of wage slaves from a philosophical standpoint to begin with. If you get to choose where you work, you're not a slave. You can choose your wages. You can negotiate those wages. Regardless, I think that's an idiotic. That's not going to happen. I don't think that is happening. I'm working in the game industry, and I can tell you that's not happening. Here's what he says. Quote, they're not creating value, putting it in the marketplace, hoping it explodes, and profit sharing and overages and all that nice stuff. You pay me X dollars an hour, I built you a game, here, go, put it on your servers. I don't think it's really inspiring for game developers. And then he goes on to call it dangerous. Again, dangerous for who? The publisher? For him? For the player? I'm very confused at who it's dangerous for. Game Pass offers unmatched value for players. You get hundreds of games. Potentially one day, maybe you get thousands of games, but right now you get hundreds of games for a low monthly fee. You get to try out games you would never even dream of trying out because you don't want to take that chance and pay that money because you've been burned too many times. How many jewels have been discovered? You as a Game Pass subscriber, if you subscribe to Game Pass, how many games have you discovered that way? I know myself, a handful that I would have never tried that I end up playing because of Game Pass. Shawn Layden frames it as dangerous, but never acknowledges that there's consumer benefits. He's focusing entirely on the publisher side of this. He's focusing entirely, in fairness, on the executive side of this, as his experience, with his experience or utilizing his experience as a PlayStation executive. And yeah, I think for PlayStation, it's bad. I think PlayStation is operating under an outdated business model. That's it. I think that's what's actually dangerous. I don't think that an outdated business model that is $70 games and hardware that you sell to players that they can only play those games on is good. I think that's actually dangerous. And so disrupting that outdated business model, does that make the disruption bad? I don't think so. He brings up sustainability, or at least the article brings up sustainability. They try to, Game Pass is not sustainable. I don't agree with that either. Game Pass is already sustainable, just not by Sony's standard. And this is where I think we get into his perspective as a Sony executive and knowing how they operated and are operating. And I don't see it. I don't see Sony adjusting in the same way that Microsoft is adjusting. Microsoft isn't operating like Sony. They're using Game Pass as a long-term platform investment. And you can see that. That's how, it makes sense for Microsoft to bring their marquee titles over to PlayStation. It's one big advertisement. We talk about it all the time here. Sony can't do that. Xbox can bring over a Halo, a Gears, a Forza Horizon to Sony because all those games drop day one. The next iteration of those games drop day one on Game Pass. It's one giant commercial so that when those next iterations come, all those players who played those games, they're top 10 in the store, over on PlayStation, come and subscribe to Game Pass, and a big portion of them will. I think Microsoft's revenue strategy is no longer on a console, it's ecosystem driven. It's not Xbox sales driven. That's the key right there. Sony is slowly moving in that direction, but Xbox is already there. And I think you have this dichotomy that is existing, and I think Layden ultimately is applying his old school logic to this new subscription era strategy, and it just doesn't work. He compares it to Netflix, and he says that Game Pass is going to have some of the same flaws that Netflix has, but he doesn't mention at all that Netflix completely disrupted Hollywood for the better. As consumers, we are consuming more content than ever before. We're consuming more quality content than ever before. And sure, there are arguments out there like, well, have you seen the movies? Movies in the movie theater are not great. Yeah, movies are really expensive. But look at television. Look at series. We have never had, that's where all the creativity is. That's where all the money is being put. Netflix, from Stranger Things to Game of Thrones, etc., etc. Netflix and subscriptions has completely disrupted the game, and has done so for the better. Layden talks about the flaws, but he never brings that fact up. That's what subscription gaming is doing. Xbox actually releases new AAA titles on day one, something Sony won't do because they can't do right now. They're stuck in their old school business model. Game Pass rotates, refreshes, and supports indie games far better than Sony's model does right now. I think Sony ultimately has a fear of change. And in fairness, Xbox could take the chance because they were in last place in the console wars, which brings up another pet peeve of mine. The pet peeve of people are like, Xbox is dead. Xbox, even if you take that they were in last place, because they were in last place in the hardware sales, 30 million consoles. Just because you're in last place in a booming industry doesn't mean you're dead. That doesn't mean Xbox is dead at all. Like that has never stood up to argument or to scrutiny. That argument has never stood up to scrutiny. That's more consoles than they ever sold before. That's the thing. You know what I mean? So they're in last place in a booming industry. This is the thing. Ultimately, I think because Sony's in first place, they're kind of tied into their old school model, and it's starting to show. And I think Layden illustrates that, in my opinion. I think Layden's warning ultimately may just be an admission that Sony can't match Xbox's scale right now. You think about it. Xbox went out and got huge developer acquisitions. They got huge studio acquisitions. And why? At the time, they were critiqued. What are they doing? Oh my goodness. And now it makes sense. You need all of those studios to be popping out and churning out content in order to win in a subscription-based playing field. That's it. That's ultimately what it is. I'm not sure that Layden's, he tries to mask his critique behind, in my opinion, he tries to mask his critique as I'm standing up for developers. And this is bad for developers. But at no point does he talk about gamers, which is really interesting. And so he's masking it behind this wall of ethics, when in reality, I think it's a critique about his strategy's inability to compete. And by his strategy, I mean Sony's strategy. He led Sony's strategy. It's partly his fault that Sony is caught back-footed right now with respect to Game Pass and with respect to subscription games, platform games, ecosystems being the future. Everyone's going to go that direction, guys. If you're in the comments right now, let me know, first of all, let me know where you agree with me so far. But if you're in the comments right now telling me I'm wrong, tell me why. Tell me why. Or you're saying, no, subscription gaming is not going to be a thing. It is. It is. I hate to break it to you. We're headed that direction. How is it that in every other major consumer entertainment medium, we've gone to a subscription-based model, but we can't do it for games? You're going to have to explain why to me. Nobody's been able to effectively do that yet. On that note, before we wrap up here, before we head on, I've got a few more points to make. If you haven't yet, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. I'm X1 the Gamer. I drop videos like this all the time right here. Please subscribe to us, share us with your friends. Also, consider becoming a member. We do live streams every Wednesday. You get a loyalty badge and some custom emotes. I've got a few more points. Game Pass drives more sales for smaller devs. How's that bad for developers? We know that. Independent developers have come out and said that. Big developers have come out and said that. They love being on Game Pass. Game Pass supports games that would have died in a traditional $60 launch window. He fails to bring that up. In fact, he talks a lot about having to go to $80 games. Like, well, who's paying? I'm not paying $80 for a game. What the heck? I think he discounts the entire AA and indie space. I think he's primarily speaking about AAA games when he talks about Game Pass. And AAA games Phil Spencer talks about it all the time. They had their own issues that they were dealing with. The business model no longer works where you can put hundreds of $1 million into a game and then expect to get that return solely on your console. Game Pass enables you to do it. It's just a reality to take more risks. Ultimately, I think in closing here, Layden never offers an alternative. If Game Pass is so dangerous, what's the better solution? He lists all of the problems, and a lot of the article, I'd encourage you to go read it yourself. A lot of the article is about how players are spending less on gaming, and that's kind of, and how, especially during difficult economic times, what is the solution here? And in that's the context of the article, and he never offers a solution. He talks about $80 price tags. That's not a solution. What is it? Is it $80 price tags? Is that your solution? Is it microtransactions? Is it early access cash grabs? What is your solution? His criticism lacks any forward-looking solution. It really does come off as nostalgia for how things used to work. That's it. And I think, again, I'm going back to my original point here. I think he's representative of the old guard trying to gatekeep the future of gaming. In my day, this is how it worked. This is wrong. This is bad for gaming. Is it? Is it bad for gamers? Because if it's good for gamers, it's good for gaming. That's what you're missing. That's the point that he never said. He never addressed if it's bad for gamers. Only developers, and he used the faulty paradigm of slave wages, which I just think is completely outdated. Anyways, that's a little bit of my rant today. Would love to know what you guys think, what I got right, what I got wrong. These are some quotes from the article, this VGT Gaming News post. Again, go read the full article if you want to. Gamesindustry.biz, go check it out. I'll link it actually in the post below, or in the description below. I just think he's wrong. And you can see it. The entire article comes from a very specific worldview. You can see what they're setting up. It's a doomsday worldview, ultimately. And Layden validates their worldview. That's ultimately what it is. That's going to do us for today, everybody. Thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you for hanging out. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to this channel. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.